So like she said, my name is Hashiguchi. I'm the registered dietitian working with the Celiac disease program at Children's National. What that looks like is I usually work with families right after their diagnosis as they make that pretty big transition over to a gluten-free lifestyle. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about a safe gluten-free school year. One thing I hear a lot when I meet with families is they feel pretty confident about doing this in their own home, that, well, that's fine, we'll make the kitchen gluten-free, we'll, plan those meals. But when you're out of the home, when you're at school, you lose a little bit of that control. And so I find that this is kind of an area that a lot of people have some concerns about and some questions about. And so just wanted to touch on that today and talk about that. All right, so pretty much what we're going to be talking about today. I'm definitely going to talk with you guys about just good nutrition overall. I think it's really important to be touching on how to identify those safe ingredients to be packing, in your child's lunch, or how to help other people understand which ingredients are safe. Some ideas for packing lunch, and then also just some considerations for school events and ways to be talking to your kids' teachers and other staff at the school as well. All right. Okay, so, I meet with a lot of patients, celiac and not, and one of the big questions that I get, whether or not families are eating gluten-free is just about what really they should be sending for lunch and what a really good, well-balanced lunch kind of looks like. So, you don't want to just pack, kind of junk for your kids, especially when you're thinking about school time. You want to make sure that they're getting all of the correct nutrition that they need. So in order to be thinking about packing a good gluten-free lunch, I think we need to back up a little bit and just go back to, basic, good general nutrition to begin with. So some of you might be familiar with the MyPlate method, developed by the USDA. So this is a great resource, choosemyplate.gov, for just good, balanced nutrition overall. And what we're really looking at here, you can see, is just a model of how we really want anybody's plate to be looking. So you see that half of that plate is made up of fruits and vegetables, and we encourage those to be, fresh fruits and vegetables. With that other half, you can see that it's really split between grains and protein. So with that bottom half of the plate, that purple plate, we want those to be lean protein. So for example, chicken, beef, lean beef, eggs, nuts, things like that, seafood, all of that. And what you'll really notice to this point is that about 3/4 of that plate is made up of those foods that are naturally gluten-free anyway. So really, we want a good bulk of anybody's diet to be made up of a lot of those naturally gluten-free foods, which is good news. It makes it, a little bit easier on us. Where it gets a little bit tricky is that orange kind of corner of the plate, which is the grains section. What we recommend is to try and choose whole grains. So for a lot of people, they think whole grains, they immediately think whole wheat, and that's actually not true at all. Whole wheat is definitely a whole grain, but there's a lot of other options too. For example, corn is a whole grain, quinoa is a whole grain, brown rice is an awesome whole grain, certified gluten-free oats are a great whole grain. So you can really still be incorporating all the different sections of that plate into your child's diet. You'll also see that there's that cup on the side, that blue cup that represents dairy, and really wanting to make sure that we're getting some good dairy sources, some calcium sources in your kid's diet. Usually that's going to be milk, cheese, or yogurt, but throughout the day we want to try and get 2 to 3 servings of those dairy foods as well. All right. So, really as we're thinking about eating a good gluten-free lunch, we're really just thinking about this basic nutrition. How can we hit all of those different food groups? How can we incorporate fruits and vegetables? How can we incorporate meats? How can we get whole grains, cheese, dairy, things like that? Just to get the whole package, make sure that we're really getting all of those nutrients that we need. Each of the food groups offers different nutrients, so by having all of them and trying to hit all of them in a meal, that's really the best way to be thinking about that. Particularly for fruits and vegetables, want to think about really trying to get all the colors, the rainbow. There's some blue, some red, some green. So really trying to mix it up throughout the week to see if you're really getting all of those. And I assure you that you don't need to pack a sandwich at lunch to try and hit all of these food groups. There's a lot of good options, and I'll go through some different options as well. All right. But I did want to take just a minute to kind of back up even further and talk about, how we even know what foods are gluten-free and what foods are safe to be eating. So, when you see a product, you're not necessarily going to see that it says contains gluten on it. So you need to be able to identify it and then also be able to explain to others how we identify it. So gluten is found in any product containing wheat, barley, and rye. So most commonly, if you kind of walk up to somebody on the street and were to ask them what foods gluten are in, a lot of people could hit those kind of wheat-based foods. They would say pasta, they would say bread, they would say cookies, crackers, muffin, something like that. A lot of people could do that. But not a lot of people know that gluten is found in some lunch meats. Not a lot of people know that it's in a lot of soups. Flour is sometimes used to thicken soups. They don't, necessarily know that, even though it might seem intuitive, that a chicken nugget is actually breaded in, wheat. So a lot of times trying to educate to make sure that people know that it's not just those foods, like bread and pasta. Even, I'm sure many of you are aware that Play-Doh contains gluten, and when you're thinking about your child in school, that could be something that's being used in the classroom, and your child's teacher might have absolutely no idea that if that ends up in your child, eating it, then that's harmful for them. So what I have here on the screen, and you don't need to commit this to memory or anything, is just our list of unsafe ingredients that we give out with the children's program when someone is newly diagnosed. If you guys are interested in these materials that I have up here, you can stop at our program table on the way out, and we have full lists that we can give you. And they're also online at childrensnational.org/celiac, so you can check that out as well. But again, as we were talking about, you're not going to necessarily be able to pick up a package and it's not going to say contains gluten, as it might for something like peanut. Those are ones that are required to be declared. So one of the best ways to really identify whether or not a product contains gluten is to be going through the ingredient list. And these are really some of the main ingredients that you're wanting to look for and wanting to identify. Yeah. And then also keep in mind that, if a product is labeled gluten-free, we're, thankful with the new labeling laws that is a product that's, required to actually be gluten-free. Yeah. But the good news is that there are a lot of foods that are naturally gluten-free. And again, as we run through this list, you'll see that the majority of these foods are really what we want to be making up a child's diet. Milk, yogurt, cheese, butter, sour cream, all those dairy foods that are naturally gluten-free. Things like eggs and poultry and beef, seafood, fruits and vegetables, beans, all of these things are gluten-free. Now you're going to want to double check through everything. Again, like how I mentioned, sometimes lunch meats can contain gluten. So you definitely want to check everything, but these are the foods that really your child with celiac disease shouldn't need to eat anything, anything different. And this is really important when you're thinking about the classroom, because you think about, let's say a party, and your teacher might think, well, my child, might think that your child needs, something specific like a gluten-free cupcake or something like that. But really, if we can be looking for these naturally gluten-free foods and trying to incorporate them into the diet and into the classroom, that's always a good way to go. All right. So we talked a little bit about basic good nutrition for packing lunches, also how to identify some of the foods that are safe. So let's go through, just some examples of some gluten-free lunches that you could pack for your child are up there on the board. Think outside the sandwich. You can definitely pack a gluten-free, sandwich on some gluten-free bread, and that's a great option. If your child doesn't like that, don't panic. There are tons of other options and ways you can go. And I feel like this is the #1 question I get, but again, you just want to go back to that idea of trying to get the different food groups. It doesn't have to be that kind of standard option. You could pack hummus as your protein, pack some tortilla chips, carrots, strawberries, get some milk. That's a great, beautiful, balanced lunch right there. If your child is able to eat nuts or able to take those to school, packing, some peanut butter with some rice cakes or some crackers that they can have it spread on, a banana, a cheese stick, something like that. You just really want to be thinking about incorporating all of those different food groups. Corn tortillas can come into play there, and trying to, use those almost as like a wrap is a great idea. You can even make like a lunch meat roll up, make a wrap using lettuce instead of a tortilla or something like that. If your child's a little bit older or a younger kid that likes salads, those can be a great idea because you can really pack a lot of your fruits and vegetables, pack some proteins in there, and then see if maybe there's something on the side like some gluten-free crackers, something like that, to give that little bit of that grains too. Depending on your child's school, you might be able to heat up leftovers, and that's always a great option if that's a possibility, or if your child doesn't mind eating them a little bit colder. But really, again, what we're looking for here is just thinking about the different food groups. There's tons of different proteins, there's tons of different gluten-free grains, lots of fruits and vegetables. We just want a good variety. We want to be constantly trying to incorporate all those food groups. And again, like how I mentioned before, really trying to make sure that we're rotating up those fruits and vegetables, mixing it up a little bit. So these are just ideas, it's not things that you need to follow necessarily, but just kind of the ideas to be, thinking about those different food groups, trying to incorporate them. I know a lot of people jump to in their mind for a school lunch a sandwich with a side of chips and some fruit. That doesn't need to be the case. It doesn't, need to be that in order to be a healthy lunch. So we'll do some questions at the end if people have more questions about the school lunches, but I do want to move into a couple other things that I think are really important to be aware of in terms of keeping your gluten-free child safe at school. So I think the biggest thing here is just going to be communication, really making sure that you're talking to teachers. I know we're ending the school year now and then going into a new one. Also, I think a lot of what we're talking about today can also apply with summer camps as well. I know that might be a big thing for some of you during the summer. But I think it's really important if your child has celiac to be explaining that and to be explaining what that means. I think a lot of times because it's not, like a peanut allergy with an EpiPen or something like that, people are confused and don't really understand that this is something really critical for your child's health. So definitely making sure that, you're prepared to be able to explain what that means, explain that this is really a lifelong commitment to being gluten-free that you've had to take on for your child's health. And I think the earlier you can have that conversation, with the more people, it's going to be the better. And I think, when you start out the school year, I would really try and suggest, meeting with your teacher up front, talking to them, seeing if you can get a sense of what sort of events are going to be happening. Is the teacher planning to use a pizza party as a reward for the class, or is there going to be Valentine's parties, or things like that you want to be aware of. See what you can be aware of in the beginning. The more information you have up front, the better you can plan for your child. We also, I would suggest really trying to be prepared with alternatives for whenever is possible for your child. And, I think when you think about it, for the class parties, as I was talking about earlier, with trying to see if you can incorporate those naturally gluten-free foods, and that way your child can be trying to enjoy the same food, alongside the rest of the class. Your child's teacher might appreciate if you give a list of snacks or things like that are okay for your child to have, because I think a lot of people would have no idea that, for example, a potato chip is gluten-free, or that most popcorns are gluten-free, or that your child could probably have a popsicle, but they probably definitely can't have an ice cream sandwich. So, if you can be prepared like that and just have that information, and really be advocating for it, the great thing is that then these are foods that are, they're not specialty products, they're just the natural gluten-free foods that really could be provided for all of the children. Okay. All right, and the final point that I want to touch on is cross-contamination, because I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges with eating gluten-free in a school. I think this comes up if you are hoping to have your child eat in the school cafeteria. This is a really, really big point to be touching on, because if a food can't be prepared in a separate area, it's not going to be gluten-free. No matter what the ingredients were to start out with, if it's touching or if it's coming into contact with gluten, it's not a gluten-free food anymore. And a lot of schools, this is going to be really difficult to do. So you definitely want to make sure that you find out about their preparation process, about what's going on, behind the scenes before you are, comfortable eating with sending your child to eat in the cafeteria. So, just for an example, you don't want, the same spoon going into a pasta salad that's going into a green salad, or if you're cooking, hamburgers on a grill and at the same time next to it you're also heating up buns, that food's not going to be gluten-free anymore. So really trying to make sure that point comes across, I think, is really critical. Even, when you think about it with children in the classroom. So for example, having a bowl of, cookies next to a bowl of popcorn. If all the kids' hands are going into both of those bowls, that's really not going to be a gluten-free food anymore. So, thinking about some creative solutions that, could you pull your child's food out first and, have that be set aside for them so that it's not coming into contact with everything? Could they use serving dishes that are separate between the two? So really trying to articulate that it's not just necessarily the ingredients in the food, but it's also the preparation process, I think is a really critical thing for schools. All right. So that was really kind of the end of my presentation, but I did want to open it up for questions, because definitely to hear about experiences that you all have had and any advice that I could provide for that.
Easy to come around. Mm-hmm. By the way, if you see the poll, actually, it's been going on throughout your presentation, Laura, is that the question was, Is the school that you or your child attend supportive of gluten-free diet? And you see the 33-67 split.
Yeah.
And it kept going between 40 to 60%.
Yeah, I was kind of watching that out of the corner of my eye. I'm surprised to see what a large percentage are saying no for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's our first question.
Do you have a list of other products besides, for instance, the Play-Doh? We found out about the Play-Doh a couple years ago the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have, just like you have a list of the foods, do you have a list of other products that contain wheat that are used, that are common school supplies?
Yeah. Do you mean like cosmetic products, or can I ask what you're?
I'm talking about in the school setting.
Like in art class, paper mache is made of wheat flour.
Sure.
Right, like things like that.
Yeah, I don't have an exhaustive list that I can give you, but I can tell you that the common ones that you're going to want to think about would be Play-Doh is definitely a big one. You're aware of that. Also, glues and like paste, anything like that. Sometimes those are thickened up with flour. So depending, yeah. I don't know for sure, but I know that sometimes that can be the case. Yeah, there we go. And also clay products. I've run across them that do, you know.
All clay?
I'm sorry?
All clay?
Yeah, some is gluten-free. Definitely, you just want to double check with those things.
And one other thing I'd like to add, it's very helpful if you do a 504. My daughter is a high academic performer. She's in the advanced academics program, but we did a 504 anyway. And so what happens is a letter follows her to every class that she goes to, so that I don't have to give a whole explanation every year to every teacher that she has to explain to them the necessity of consulting with me before you feed her, you know, letting me know when there's a party. So doing a 504 is actually a good thing.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Any questions from our online universe?
We don't have any questions right now from the online universe, though I could try and drum some up.
Okay.
But right now, there's no questions from the online universe.
Well, great.
Though the online universe is upset about the answers to the poll.
Oh.
I have just a quick question. It's not particularly school related, but I know on the list of ingredients, I had matcha mentioned there, which we use like the matcha green tea powder and stuff. But that's totally the first I've heard about matcha having gluten in it. Is that like an additive somewhere, or is that something we need to be aware of?
Yeah, I would definitely, if you're using a product with matcha in it, you definitely want to check if that's gluten-free or not. Yeah.
And rice syrup?
Mm-hmm.
That's the other one.
Yeah,
So
definitely
use
want to
all
check.
this flavor.
Sometimes used as flavors.
Because I would skip right over rice syrup.
Yeah, yes.
And Wegmans Rice Krispies are gluten free, but regular Rice Krispies are not.
Oh, the Wegmans are good?
Yeah, Wegmans is very needed.
Yeah.
In terms of deli meats, just look at the ingredients, I guess.
Yeah, I actually find a lot of deli meats are starting to label themselves gluten-free, and I'm finding that a lot of them are. You actually did bring up a good point by mentioning that. One thing, an issue for cross-contamination can also be the deli slicer as well, and that's a big one. So definitely check the ingredients, check the labels. There's a lot of brands out there that are now fully gluten-free.
Force is fully gluten-free.
Yeah, there's a lot out there, but you definitely want to also double check with that slicer as well that you're not cross-contaminating that.
So we have a pickier eater, she's young, and so a lot of times I know that some of the vitamins that we're going to be lacking because we don't have the fortified cereals anymore, we might not necessarily be getting in her diet. Is there a vitamin that you would recommend? Like, I think Flintstones I think might be out because that has that could possibly have wheat in it. I don't know whether there was a vitamin that you thought would be helpful. But
Yeah, there are actually plenty of gluten-free vitamins out there. A lot of, and it kind of depends on what you're looking at for your specific child. Most of actually the gummy vitamins are gluten-free, but they can be a little bit, they never have iron. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, they pretty much never have iron just because they can't get it into that form. So if your child isn't a meat eater, that's probably not a good option. There are a lot of other gluten-free out there, and as well as liquid as well. There's some liquid if she would prefer to take it that way. Really, any children's multivitamin would be fine for her to be taking as long as it's age appropriate. And there's plenty at the drugstore that you would need. In general, if you're concerned about what she's missing out in fortification, it's mainly those B vitamins is what you're looking for. So that would really be what you're searching for. If she's a pretty good fruit and vegetable eater, like eating a good variety of colors, if she's not, you might be wanting to look for one that's a little more complete than just the B complex, like looking for one with some vitamin A, vitamin C as well. Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions in the event there's those occasional situations where the child does have something that's been contaminated, something that would soothe their stomach and calm their system down?
Yeah, unfortunately there really is no way to take it back. There's nothing that you can eat, really no medication that you can take that's going to reverse that process. I would say that the best thing to do, because that does happen, that's going to happen for everybody time to time. I don't think anybody's gone gluten-free and done it perfectly 100%. An accident is going to come up. The best thing I can tell you to do is to really take that as a learning experience with your child and to do your best to kind of talk through a situation. What happened? Did we trust somebody who really didn't, understand what we were asking for? Did we not read the label? Just really kind of take that as a learning experience. But unfortunately, there's no way to take it back.
By the way, we will have all of the presentations available on glutenfreelive.org. So we're going to reverse our polling to our YouTube channel at the end of the expo, so you guys will be able to rewatch and watch. And we're also coming out with a learning management system as well. So we'll be developing a curriculum around gluten-free living. So that's coming up this year. Well, thank you, Laura, for your time. I hope everybody's enjoyed the expo. I think it keeps getting better and better every year.